The diplomatic shuttle shuddered violently as it entered the atmosphere of the unknown planet. Commander Sarah Chen gripped her restraints tightly, her knuckles turning white as warning alarms blared throughout the cabin. Red emergency lights flashed, casting eerie shadows across the metallic walls. "Computer, status report," she shouted over the deafening roar of the failing engines. "Multiple system failures detected. Hull integrity at 47%. Engine core destabilizing. Impact imminent in 3 minutes," the AI responded in its unnervingly calm voice. Sarah wasn't alone in the shuttle. Across from her sat Cthera, the Nixilian diplomat. The tall, humanoid alien's typically smooth blue skin was now rippling with waves of distressed purple bioluminescence. Their large, silver eyes reflected the emergency lights as they worked frantically at their own control panel. "Our shields cannot withstand the atmospheric composition," Thera said, their melodic voice strained with worry. "The acid content is far higher than any habitable world should contain." Another violent shake threw them both against their restraints. Sparks flew from a nearby console, and the acrid smell of burning electronics filled the air. Sarah's military training kicked in as she assessed their rapidly diminishing options. "We need to find a landing zone," she said, switching to manual controls. "The computer's suggested landing trajectory will take us straight into that mountain range." Through the view screen, they could see the hostile landscape rushing up to meet them. Jagged crystal formations jutted from the ground like massive teeth, while pools of bubbling liquid scattered the surface. The sky above was a sickly yellow-green, with dark clouds promising deadly rain. Thera's fingers danced across their controls, their movements precise despite the chaos around them. There, 3 kilometers east, a relatively flat area between the crystal formations. "It might be our only chance." Sarah nodded, adjusting their course. The shuttle's remaining engine screamed in protest as she pushed it to its limits. Warning messages continued to flash across her screen. "Hulul breach imminent. Engine core critical. Landing GR malfunction. Brace for impact," Sarah shouted as they made their final approach. The ground rushed up to meet them at an alarming speed. The impact was devastating. Metal screamed against crystal as the shuttle skidded across the surface. Sarah's head slammed against her headrest, and she tasted blood. The viewport cracked but held, protecting them from the caustic atmosphere outside. After what felt like an eternity, they finally ground to a halt. Silence fell, broken only by the hiss of damaged systems and the ping of cooling metal. Sarah's ears were ringing as she ran a quick self-assessment. Bruised, possibly a concussion, but alive. She turned to check on Cthera. The Nixilian had already freed themselves from their restraints and was checking the ship's systems. Their skin had settled into a worried shade of deep blue. "The ship, it's beyond repair," they said softly, "and the emergency beacon is damaged." Sarah unstrapped herself, wincing at her injuries. "We need to gather whatever supplies we can and find shelter. That storm's getting closer, and I don't think we want to be here when it hits." Cthera's silver eyes met hers. In that moment, their differences, human and Nixilian, 2 species that barely trusted each other, seemed insignificant compared to their shared need to survive. "The atmospheric sensors indicate the air is toxic," Cthera said, retrieving emergency equipment from a damaged storage compartment. "We have enough filter masks and oxygen supplements for perhaps 2 standard weeks." Sarah helped gather supplies, trying not to think about what would happen after those 2 weeks. "Then we better make them count. Look, those crystal formations might provide shelter from the acid rain. We need to move fast." As they prepared to leave the wreckage of their shuttle, both knew their survival would depend on working together. Neither mentioned that such close cooperation between their species was practically unheard of. Some things were more important than ancient prejudices. The storm clouds grew darker above them, and in the distance, something large moved among the crystal formations. Their new world was waiting, and it didn't look friendly. Sarah and Kythera reached the crystal caves just as the first drops of acid rain began to fall. The deadly drops sizzled against the ground behind them, leaving small smoking craters in their wake. They ducked into the nearest cave opening, their breathing heavy from carrying survival supplies from the crashed shuttle. "That was close," Sarah said, setting down her load of equipment. She wiped sweat from her forehead, careful not to disturb her filter mask. Even with protection, the air made her eyes sting. Kythera's skin rippled with patterns of relieved green light. "Indeed, though I must admit, your species' physical endurance is impressive. I would not have expected a human to match an Exilian's pace." The cave around them glowed with a soft, blue-white light that seemed to come from the crystals themselves. The walls sparkled like thousands of tiny stars, creating an almost magical atmosphere. Sarah found herself staring at how the light played across Kythera's luminescent skin, creating beautiful patterns she'd never seen before. "We should check if this cave is safe for a temporary base," Sarah said, forcing herself to focus on survival. She pulled out a portable scanner from their salvaged equipment. The crystals might be radioactive or toxic. Kythera moved closer to examine the scanner's readings, their tall form towering over Sarah's shoulder. The human noticed a sweet, almost floral scent coming from the Nexilian, something their species used for communication that the diplomatic courts had briefed her about. "The crystals appear to be a variant of bioluminescent quartz," Kythera explained, their silver eyes reflecting the cave's glow. "They're actually purifying the air around us." "That's fascinating. I've never seen anything like it." Over the next few hours, they worked together to set up a camp deeper in the cave system. Sarah's military training proved useful in establishing defensive positions and organizing their supplies, while Kythera's scientific knowledge helped them understand their shelter's unique properties. As they worked, they talked. At first, it was just about survival, how to conserve oxygen, where to store supplies, how to purify water they found deeper in the caves. But gradually, their conversations became more personal. "I've always wondered," Sarah said as they sat down to eat their first meal in the cave, "why do Nexilians avoid physical contact with other species? Is it some kind of religious belief?" Kythera's skin shifted to a thoughtful shade of purple. "Not religious, no. Our skin is highly sensitive. We can read emotional and biological information through touch. With other Nexilians, it's natural, but with other species, the sensations can be overwhelming. Some find it unpleasant." Sarah nodded, suddenly very aware of how close they were sitting. "I'm sorry if being stuck here with me is uncomfortable then." "Actually," Kythera said softly, their skin showing hints of a color Sarah hadn't seen before, "humans are different. Your emotional patterns are strong but not unpleasant. They're quite fascinating, actually." They paused, their skin darkening with what Sarah guessed might be embarrassment. "I probably shouldn't have said that. Such observations about other species are considered inappropriate in my culture." A distant rumble echoed through the cave, reminding them of the hostile world outside. Sarah checked their perimeter sensors. "Looks like some kind of electrical storm brewing out there. The equipment from the shuttle should be safe in here." Kythera moved to help her secure their supplies, their movements graceful despite their height. As they worked side by side, Sarah realized she was starting to see past the alien features, the blue skin, the silver eyes, the height difference. She was seeing Kythera as a person, not just an Exilian. As night fell, according to their chronometers, the storm outside made it impossible to tell. They set up separate sleeping areas. But neither went to sleep immediately. Instead, they sat in comfortable silence, watching the crystal lights dance across the cave walls, each lost in thoughts about how their preconceptions of the other species were beginning to change. Outside, the storm raged on, but in their crystal cave, human and Exilian had found a moment of peace, and perhaps the beginning of something neither of them had expected. After 3 days in the crystal caves, Sarah and Kythera had established a solid routine. They took turns monitoring their supplies and exploring the safer parts of the cave system. The morning of the fourth day brought an unexpected discovery. Sarah was checking the water filtration system they'd set up when Cthulhu called out from a deeper tunnel. The Nyxilian's voice echoed with excitement, their skin pulsing with bright yellow lights. "Commander Chen, you need to see this." Sarah grabbed her portable light and hurried toward Cthulhu's voice. The tunnel opened into a massive chamber that took her breath away. Ancient structures rose from the crystal floor, buildings made of some kind of metallic material that hadn't corroded despite the planet's hostile environment. "This is impossible," Cthulhu whispered, their silver eyes wide. "These structures, they show signs of both human and Nyxilian architectural influences, but they're clearly thousands of years old." Sarah walked toward the nearest building, her light revealing strange symbols carved into its walls. "How is that possible? Our species only met each other 50 years ago." Before Cthulhu could answer, a loud crash echoed from the direction of their camp. Both of them tensed. They had seen massive creature tracks outside the caves, but hadn't encountered any predators yet. "We should check that out," Sarah said, already moving back toward the tunnel. Cthulhu followed close behind. They reached their camp just in time to see a large reptilian creature with 6 legs ripping through their supply bags. Its scales were crystal-like, similar to the cave walls, making it nearly invisible when still. "Don't move," Cthulhu whispered, their skin shifting to match the cave walls. "A Nyxilian defense mechanism. Its species appears to hunt by movement." But the creature had already noticed them. It turned its head, revealing rows of sharp, crystalline teeth. Sarah's military training kicked in. She slowly reached for the makeshift spear they'd created for defense. The creature lunged. Sarah rolled left while Cthulhu moved right, their movements perfectly coordinated after days of working together. The creature's claws scraped against crystal where they had been standing moments before. "The support beam," Sarah shouted, pointing to a weak spot in the cave ceiling above the creature. Cthulhu understood immediately. Using their superior height, they grabbed a loose crystal shaft and hurled it at the ceiling while Sarah distracted the predator. The plan worked, almost too well. The ceiling cracked and collapsed, crushing the creature, but the cave around them started to shake. "Run," Sarah yelled, grabbing what supplies she could. Cthulhu snatched their water purifier and emergency oxygen tanks. They sprinted through the tunnels as the cave collapsed behind them. The only path available led them deeper into the cave system, toward the ancient ruins they'd discovered. Finally, the rumbling stopped. They found themselves in the ruins chamber, breathing heavily. Sarah realized she was pressed against Cthulhu, the Nyxilian's arm protectively around her. She could feel the rapid pulse of colors moving across Cthulhu's skin. "I apologize," Cthulhu said, quickly stepping back. Their skin showed swirls of deep purple, embarrassment. "I acted on instinct." "You saved my life," Sarah said softly. "No need to apologize for that." They looked around the chamber that was now their new home. The collapse had cut off their way back, but at least they had grabbed some essential supplies. "Look at this," Cthulhu said, examining one of the ruins more closely. "These markings, they're like a combination of ancient Earth hieroglyphs and early Nyxilian script. Sarah, I think we've stumbled upon something extraordinary here." Sarah joined them, noticing how their shoulders almost touched as they studied the markings. Maybe getting stranded here wasn't completely bad luck after all. As they began setting up a new camp among the ruins, both felt a shift in their relationship, surviving together, fighting together, discovering together. It was becoming harder to remember why their species were supposed to keep their distance from each other. The ancient ruins held many secrets, but the biggest discovery might be how natural it felt for a human and Nyxilian to work as one. The acid storms outside the ruins grew worse each day. Sarah sat near one of the ancient windows, watching purple lightning split the toxic sky. According to Cthulhu's calculations, the storm season would last at least 2 more weeks. "The good news," Cthulhu said, approaching with their daily water rations, is that these ruins have some kind of energy field protecting them from the acid rain. The bad news is we're stuck here until the storms pass. Sarah accepted the water with a smile. She had grown used to the way Cathera's skin would shimmer with a soft blue glow whenever their hands almost touched. Well, at least we have plenty to study. Have you made any progress with those wall symbols? Cathera sat down beside her, their tall frame folding gracefully. Actually, yes, it's fascinating. These ruins tell a story of space travelers who visited both Earth and Nexilia thousands of years ago. They might have even influenced the development of both our species. A particularly loud thunder crack made them both jump. Sarah found herself instinctively reaching for Cathera's hand before catching herself. "Sorry," she said quickly, pulling back. But Cathera's skin had shifted to a new color, a warm gold that Sarah had never seen before. "It's all right," they said softly. "I've been meaning to tell you. The sensitivity of my skin has adjusted to your presence. Your touch no longer overwhelms my senses." Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. Among Nexilians, allowing physical contact was as intimate as a kiss among humans. "Are you sure? I know your people have strict rules about touching other species." "Many rules exist because of fear and misunderstanding," Cathera said, their voice barely above a whisper. "Being here with you has taught me that some rules deserve to be questioned." They spent the next few hours sharing stories about their cultures. Cathera taught Sarah about Nexilian art, showing her how they could create beautiful patterns with their bioluminescence. Sarah, in turn, sang human songs, making Cathera's skin dance with fascinated colors. "I never understood why humans make music until now," Cathera admitted. "The way it expresses emotions. It's similar to how we use our colors." Sarah noticed Cathera shivering slightly. The ruins grew cold during storm periods, and Nexilians were sensitive to temperature changes. Without thinking, she removed her outer jacket and offered it to them. "Won't you be cold?" Cathera asked, their skin showing concerned purple swirls. "I'm used to cold temperatures from my military training," Sarah assured them. As she helped Cathera put on the jacket, their hands touched. This time, neither pulled away. "Your emotions," Cathera said quietly, their silver eyes meeting Sarah's. "They're beautiful. I've never experienced anything like them." Sarah felt her face grow warm. "What do they feel like?" "Like your music. Complex, warm, powerful." Farad's skin was glowing with that golden color again. "Sarah, I should warn you, among my people, sharing emotions like this, it means—" "I know," Sarah said softly. "I studied Nexilian culture. I know what it means." They sat in silence for a while, hands still touching, watching the storms rage outside. Both knew they were crossing a line that could never be uncrossed. If they ever returned to their societies, this connection between them would be seen as forbidden. "Maybe," Cathera finally said, "we were meant to crash here, to learn that the boundaries between our species are not as fixed as we thought." The ruins around them seemed to glow faintly, as if agreeing. Ancient artifacts of a civilization that had seen the potential in both their species watched as human and Nexilian drew closer, no longer held back by the prejudices of their peoples. Outside, the storms continued, but inside the ruins, two hearts from different worlds were finding their own harmony. The storm season had passed, leaving behind a changed landscape and two beings who had grown impossibly close. Sarah and Cathera spent their mornings exploring deeper into the ruins, their newfound comfort with each other making their work easier. "Sarah," Cathera called out, their skin flashing with excitement patterns, "I think I've found something important." They stood in front of a massive wall covered in glowing symbols, their hand resting on what looked like a control panel. Sarah hurried over, noting how natural it felt now to stand close to the tall Nexilian. "What is it?" "Watch this." Cathera pressed their palm against the panel. To their surprise, it lit up with a soft blue glow. "It's responding to my biosignature. But here's the strange part. Try it yourself." Sarah placed her hand on the panel. Instead of rejecting her human DNA as they expected, it glowed even brighter. Suddenly, the wall before them shifted, revealing the hidden chamber. "That's impossible," Cthera whispered, their skin showing patterns of amazement. It recognized both our species as authorized users. According to these readings, this technology is over 50,000 years old. They entered the chamber together. The room was filled with holographic displays, somehow still functioning after thousands of years. As they walked in, the holograms activated, showing images of Earth and Nixilia. "Look at this," Sarah said, pointing to a sequence of genetic codes floating in the air. "These show the development of both our species. They're connected somehow." Thera moved closer to examine the data, their arm brushing against Sarah's. Neither pulled away anymore. "This is incredible. The ancient civilization that built these ruins, they didn't just visit our worlds. They helped create our species." The holograms showed more detailed information, how the ancients had guided the evolution of both humans and Nixilians, nurturing the development of intelligence and consciousness. Most surprisingly, the data showed that both species were perfectly compatible at a genetic level. "All those laws keeping our peoples apart," Sarah said softly, "they were based on nothing but prejudice. We're not just similar, we're related." Thera's skin rippled with deep emotions, colors that Sarah had learned to read over their time together. "This explains why I can share emotions with you so clearly, why your touch feels natural instead of alien." Suddenly, the ground shook violently. The ruins' protective field flickered. "The chamber's power source must be destabilizing," Thera said urgently. "We need to save this data before it's lost forever." They worked quickly, Sarah using her military tech training, while Cthera applied their scientific knowledge. Together, they managed to transfer the critical data to their salvaged equipment just as the chamber's systems began to fail. As they rushed out, the hidden door sealed behind them, burying the ancient chamber forever. But they had what they needed. Proof that humans and Nixilians were never meant to be separate. Safe in their main living area, they examined the saved data. Cthera's hand found Sarah's, their skin glowing with that special golden color that Sarah now knew meant love. "Do you understand what this means?" Cthera asked, their silver eyes meeting Sarah's. "If we ever get rescued, this discovery could change everything between our peoples." Sarah squeezed their hand gently. "It's already changed everything between us." They stood together, surrounded by the ruins of a civilization that had seen the potential in both their species millennia ago. The same civilization that had, perhaps not by accident, brought them together on this deadly planet. "Whatever happens," Thera said, their skin showing the beautiful pattern that Sarah had learned meant absolute trust, "we face it together, as our ancestors did long ago." Outside their window, the toxic planet's dual suns set, painting the crystal formations in brilliant colors. But the most beautiful sight was how the light played across their joined hands, human and Nixilian, no longer separated by artificial boundaries. The ancient secrets they'd discovered hadn't just revealed their shared past. They had opened the door to a shared future. The morning silence in the ruins was broken by a sudden beeping sound. Sarah woke up instantly, years of military training kicking in. Next to her, Thera's skin flickered with alertness patterns as they both recognized the sound. Their emergency beacon had somehow reactivated. "That's impossible," Sarah said, rushing to check the equipment. The beacon was completely destroyed in the crash. Thera moved to her side, their tall frame casting a shadow over the beeping device. The ruin's energy field must have gradually recharged it. "Look, it's drawing power from the same source that powers the ancient technology." They stood together, watching the beacon pulse with a strong signal. Under normal circumstances, this would be cause for celebration. Instead, they felt a heavy weight in their hearts. "Rescue ships will pick up this signal," Sarah said quietly. "Both human and Nixilian vessels patrol this sector. They'll be here within days." Thera's skin showed waves of conflicting emotions, hope mixed with fear, joy with sorrow. "If we return," They'll separate us. The Nixilian High Council will never accept what we've become to each other. They might even try to suppress our discoveries about our shared origins. Sarah reached for Cthulhu's hand, feeling the now familiar warmth of their emotional connection. We could disable the beacon, stay here together, living forever on a deadly planet. Cthulhu's skin rippled with a sad smile pattern. That would be quite a romance story. Before Sarah could respond, their perimeter sensors blared a warning. Something massive was approaching the ruins, bigger than any creature they'd encountered before. "We need to move," Sarah said, grabbing their weapons. "The signal must be attracting predators." They rushed to the observation point they'd set up. Through the ancient window, they saw a horrifying sight. A huge crystalline creature, like a cross between a centipede and a dragon, was crawling toward their sanctuary. Its 100 legs left smoking holes in the ground where they touched. "The ruined shield won't hold against that thing," Farah said, their skin showing fear patterns. "We need to reach higher ground." They grabbed essential supplies and their precious data about their species' origins, then rushed toward the upper levels of the ruins. The creature slammed against the energy shield, making the entire structure shake. "Up here," Sarah called, spotting a defensible position. They reached it just as the shield failed. The creature burst through the lower level of the ruins. Sarah and Cthulhu stood their ground together, weapons ready. As the monster reared up to strike, they moved in perfect sync, just as they had during their first predator encounter weeks ago. Sarah fired their makeshift energy weapon at the creature's eyes, while Cthulhu used their height advantage to strike at its sensitive crystal joints. Their coordination was flawless, two beings moving as one. The battle was fierce but brief. The creature, injured and confused by their joint attack, retreated, leaving them breathless but alive. In the aftermath, they held each other tightly, Cthulhu's skin glowing with the intense golden color of love and relief. The beacon continued to beep in the background, a constant reminder of the choice they faced. "We can't stay here," Cthulhu finally said, their silver eyes filled with determination. "That creature will return with others, and our peoples need to know the truth about our origins." Sarah nodded, understanding the deeper meaning. "So we let the rescue come, but we face whatever happens together." They spent the rest of the day securing their evidence and preparing for rescue. As night fell, they stood at their favorite observation point, watching the planet's twin moons rise. "Whatever happens when they come," Sarah said, holding Cthulhu close, "no one can take away what we found here." Cthulhu's skin glowed with patterns that spoke of love, courage, and hope. Not just love between us, but the truth about all our peoples. Perhaps that truth will be enough to change minds and hearts. The beacon continued its steady pulse into space, calling their peoples to a discovery that would challenge everything they believed, and to a love that defied their deepest prejudices. The rescue ships appeared in the purple sky 3 days after the beacon activated. Sarah and Cthulhu watched from the ruins as 2 vessels descended, one sleek human ship and one crystalline Nixilian vessel. "Are you ready?" Sarah asked, squeezing Cthulhu's hand. Their skin glowed with determined patterns, the gold color of love mixed with the deep blue of courage. "With you?" "Always," Cthulhu replied, their silver eyes fixed on the approaching ships. They had spent the last 3 days preparing their evidence and practicing their explanation. The data they discovered in the ruins was safely stored in multiple devices. They wore matching pieces of the ancient ruins crystal, fastened as pendants around their necks, physical proof of their discoveries. The ships landed outside the ruins' energy shield, which they had managed to partially repair. Teams in protective suits emerged from both vessels, approaching cautiously through the toxic atmosphere. "Commander Chen," a voice called over the comm system. "This is Captain Rodriguez of the ESS Hawking. Are you all right?" At the same time, a melodic Nixilian voice rang out. "Diplomat Cthulhu, this is Recovery Team Leader of Tor. We're here to bring you home." Sarah activated their comm link, her voice steady. "This is Commander Chen. We're both safe, But before you enter the ruins, you need to know something important." She nodded to Cthera, who stepped forward, their skin glowing with purpose. "We have made a discovery that will change both our people's understanding of our origins, and—" They paused, taking Sarah's hand openly. "We have found something else as well." The rescue teams stopped abruptly. Even through their protective suits, their shock was visible. An Exilian touching a human willingly was unheard of. "Cthera," Vader's voice was sharp with disapproval, "release the human at once. You know the laws." "The laws are based on lies," Cthera replied firmly, their skin pulsing with truth patterns. "We have proof that humans and Exilians share common ancestors. We were engineered by the same ancient race that built these ruins." Sarah activated the holographic projector they'd prepared, displaying the genetic evidence they'd discovered. "Our peoples were never meant to be separate. The proof is in this data and in the ruins around us." The rescue teams huddled together, discussing rapidly in their suits. Finally, Captain Rodriguez spoke. "Commander, even if what you're saying is true, there are protocols. You'll both need to be quarantined separately and debriefed." "No," Sarah and Cthera said together. Cthera's skin flashed with the fierce pattern Sarah had come to love. "We stay together," Sarah continued, "or we don't leave at all. We've survived this planet's worst dangers. We fought together, discovered together, and—" She looked at Cthera with a smile. "Fallen in love together." The silence that followed was deafening. Both rescue teams seemed frozen in place. Then, unexpectedly, one of the Nixilian scientists stepped forward. "The human speaks true. These readings, they're unprecedented. This could be the greatest discovery in both our people's history." Captain Rodriguez joined in. "And if they've survived here together all this time, maybe it's time we question the old barriers between our species." Cthera's skin glowed brighter, hope patterns dancing across their surface. "We're not asking for immediate acceptance. We're asking for a chance to present our evidence, to show that change is possible." Sarah held up their research data. "Everything we've discovered here proves that our people's separation was based on fear and ignorance. We can be more. We can be what the ancients intended. Two peoples working together, growing together." The rescue teams conferred again, this time for longer. Finally, both leaders stepped forward. "Very well," Captain Rodriguez said. "You can remain together during quarantine and debriefing. But you should know, this won't be an easy path." Cthera's skin showed the pattern for joy, mixed with their special color for Sarah. "The best paths rarely are, but we'll walk it together." As they prepared to board the rescue ships, Sarah and Cthera looked back at the ruins that had changed their lives. The ancient structure seemed to glow in farewell, its secrets now ready to change two worlds. Their choice was made. Now they would face the consequences together, armed with truth, love, and the hope of a better future for both their peoples. 6 months after their rescue, Sarah and Cthera stood before the combined Human-Nixilian Science Council. The grand meeting hall was packed with representatives from both species, all eager to hear the final presentation of their discoveries. Cthera's skin glowed with confidence as they displayed the holographic evidence from the ruins. "The genetic markers are undeniable. Our people share more than just similar traits. We share creators, purpose, and potential." Sarah stepped forward, her hand naturally finding Cthera's. After months of public appearances, this gesture no longer shocked the audience. The ancient civilization didn't just engineer our species. They left us a message that we were meant to find each other, to grow together. The council chamber erupted in discussion. Over the past months, their story had captured the imagination of both peoples. The romance of two beings finding love on a deadly planet, combined with the groundbreaking scientific discoveries, had started changing hearts and minds. "The council recognizes," announced the human chairperson, "that the evidence presented by Commander Chen and diplomat Cthera is conclusive. The laws restricting human-Nixilian relations must be reconsidered." Cthera's skin rippled with joy patterns, the golden color of their love for Sarah mixing with bright happiness. They had fought hard for this moment, facing opposition and prejudice from both sides. But their determination and the truth they'd discovered had finally won through. Furthermore, the Nixilian council leader added, their skin showing formal approval patterns. We propose establishing a joint research station on the planet where these discoveries were made. Commander Chen and diplomat Cthulhu will lead the project. Sarah couldn't hold back her smile. They would return to the planet, not as stranded survivors this time, but as pioneers leading the way to a new future. After the ceremony, they walked through the memorial garden that had been created to honor their discovery. Crystal formations from their planet had been transplanted here, glowing softly in the evening light. Remember when you first touched my hand in those ruins? Cthulhu asked, their skin showing the memory pattern that Sarah had grown to recognize. I was so worried about breaking cultural taboos. Sarah laughed, reaching up to touch the crystal pendant they both still wore. And now look at us, about to lead the biggest joint human-Nixilian project in history. Their peaceful moment was interrupted by a group of young humans and Nixilians approaching them excitedly. This happened often now. They had become symbols of change, of barriers broken and prejudices overcome. Is it true? One young Nixilian asked, their skin showing wonder patterns. Did you really fight off crystal monsters together? Did the ruins actually predict your love? A human child added eagerly. Cthulhu's skin glowed with amusement as they knelt down to the children's level. The ruins showed us that our peoples were never meant to be apart. The rest. They looked at Sarah with silver eyes full of love. We figured out on our own. Later that evening, they stood on their apartment balcony, watching the sunset over the joint human-Nixilian city that had grown up around the science center. Construction ships were preparing for their return mission to the planet they now called Haven. Our accident turned out to be quite the miracle, Sarah said, leaning against Cthulhu's tall frame. Not an accident, Cthulhu replied, their skin glowing with the special pattern that was just for Sarah. The ancients knew that someday, two people would find those ruins and be brave enough to choose love over prejudice. As the stars came out, more couples like them, human and Nixilian together, could be seen walking in the streets below. What had started with two people stranded on a deadly planet had grown into a movement, a change, a new beginning. Their love story had become more than just their own. It had become proof that the greatest discoveries often come not from grand expeditions or careful plans, but from hearts brave enough to cross the boundaries others thought impossible. The deadly planet that had once trapped them had given them the greatest gift of all, the truth that love knows no species, and that the future belongs to those bold enough to reach for it together.